Welcome, everyone, to today's Tuesday Times Roundtable. Just in case you missed the memo, our lunch is over on this side, so hopefully you found something good left over from whatever was in here before. It looks like there was some good coffee and stuff, and you're welcome to it until someone takes it away. But the official Roundtable sandwiches are on the other side if you didn't get any of those or didn't see anything that you wanted over there. Today's session is interactive, so at the request of our moderators, I am going to officially ask that you kind of move and fill in this front section here. If you don't listen to me and do it now, they're just going to keep pestering you about it because they have activities and stuff and things to talk about. So we could do it the least painful way and just move up to the front now. So we're all together, and the activities they have for you will work out. And so who are they that want you to move to the front? That's what I'm going to answer as I read today's bio. Don't be shy. It'll be fun, I promise. This is a good session. So I'll let you move and then I'll introduce. Maybe like all first 4 rows top should fit the amount of people in the room right now, I think. So today's moderators/facilitators are 2 wonderful people from FIU Center for Leadership and Service right upstairs. We have Lindsey Goldstein, who's the graduate assistant for the Center for Leadership and Service. She has her bachelor's degree in elementary education with a minor in leadership from NOVA, Southeastern University. Here at FIU, she works with the Global Living Learning Community, as do I, and the Alternative Breaks, Academies of Leaders, Dance Marathon, and Civic Learning and Democratic Engagement Initiatives, all of the great leadership opportunities here out of our Student Affairs Division. She has a passion for service learning and experience with working with various nonprofit organizations and community groups. Also with us today is Nashira Williams, who's the Assistant Director for the Center for Leadership and Service. She has 5 years of higher ed experience, also including programs such as Alternative Breaks, the Living Learning Communities, and Civic Learning and Democratic Engagement. She is an alumna of Teach for America and has her bachelor's in sociology and child development from the Florida State University. Her master's degree is in higher education administration from here at FIU, where we were classmates, by the way, and is currently enrolled in that same doctoral program here at FIU. So I'm going to turn it over to Nashira and Lindsey for today's session.
All right, so hello everybody. How's everyone doing? Good? You got some energy? Because we're going to do some very interactive today. So we're going to get our start. So he said, I'm Lindsey.
My name is Nashira.
And we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay. So our presentation today is about activism versus slacktivism. So first we're going to start off asking you, who has heard of the term slacktivism or clicktivism? Awesome. Do you want to tell us what you think it means?
That you do only have to do you probably shouldn't do. Probably like sign petitions and sign other things like that, but you don't actually ever do any of the hard work.
Great definition. Any other definitions for slacktivism or clicktivism? Yeah.
Kind of hoping that others will do. Like I believe in a cause, but I feel that I need not do anything, hoping that someone else will do it.
Really great, yeah. So he said believing in it, but hoping others will do it. So you guys are both right. Those are great combinations, and we're going to just take a look at the official definition. One of the definitions.
Online activism. What does it do? It raises awareness for social issues. And if you've ever shared a video about a cause, worn an awareness bracelet, donated through text message, signed an online petition, or purchased a product because they donate to charity, then you've aided in raising awareness.
But by definition, that makes you a slacktivist. Slacktivist, anyone who does something in support of an issue or cause that requires minimal personal effort.
Now, whether you use the term negatively or positively, there's no denying that slacktivists can raise awareness for an issue overnight in ways no one could ever do before.
And yes, awareness is great, but can social media campaigns compare to the sort of high-risk activism that took place during the civil rights and anti-war movements of the 50s and 60s?
All right, so this graphic pretty much says it all. One more like, one more problem solved. If only it was that simple, right? So that's kind of taking the slacktivist approach, saying like, I click like, I save the world, right? There's a graphic later, I fix Africa, right? That's not how that works. So it's kind of saying there's a video that does this compare to in the 50s and 60s where you actually had to protest. You actually had to get out of your computer and do just a little bit more. So that's kind of, we're sitting behind our computer screens and we're doing all these likes, but is it really accomplishing more than the awareness piece? Which the awareness is great, but we're kind of teaching you today about going just a little bit more and to be more effective.
Okay, so Cindy Littert from Robert Morris University created this continuum for activism. And so she created a continuum of activism that we're going to kind of do 4 corners, but not really. And so I'm going to separate everyone into 4 different categories. One will be One would be passive activism, the other online activism, and the last one traditional activism. And I have a definition on here. And so you're just going to kind of talk about it in your groups and create some examples of these different elements to this continuum, and we're going to ask you to report out. So that means that you have a level of responsibility and accountability that I can hold you to in order for everyone to know what these things mean. All right, so give me a couple of seconds. If you want to group up now into 4 different parts, that helps me out a little bit, but it seems like I'm not the only one jet lagged, so I'll give you all some time. All right, so some of you are finished, and so we'll have those that are finished kind of talk about their part of the continuum first. Who would like to go first? Because I hate volunteering people. All right, thank you for volunteering as tribute. You are now open for the 19th annual Hunger Games.
Okay.
So you would just need to read
Front side and then read the back side. Okay, so ours is online activism. So we have organizing or attending online events, soliciting online donations, education via sharing, tagging, tweeting or emailing, forum and user group participation. Oh, forum, that's good. So we have sharing Facebook statuses, tweeting/retweeting, hashtagging, liking, sharing media, signing petitions online, sharing causes/events, blogging, subscribing to sites/organizations, donating and funding, and creating a site/social media profile. And I guess also following people on social media would be another.
All right, how many of you have liked a Facebook page before in your lifetime? Yeah, me too. Yeah. That's a pretty safe one, actually. Even if you don't have Facebook now, if you had it before, you probably liked something on it. Who wants to go next? Oh, you go next. I'm already here. So that was online activism, the first one.
We have Slacktivism. It says think locally, act globally. Making an online donation, signing an e-petition, becoming a fan, joining a cause or group, displaying a badge or widget, or subscribing to an e-newsletter. We talked about, I don't know if everybody heard about the Fort Lauderdale, like it's illegal to feed homeless people. So they had like this huge petition for people to like make it legal again because this like priest was getting arrested for it a bunch of times. So I signed that petition. I don't know if it worked, but again, becoming a fan of pages. I do that all the time, like against animal like abuse and like hunting. They talked about the Coney thing, which was a major scam, but we all donated to it and we know it. What else did we talk about? Oh, and the ice bucket challenge. So that was like, it was very successful. So that's good, right? Okay, cool.
And so on the continuum there, you'll see that the two that were just addressed, online activism and slacktivism, there's a high level of technology involved in that. And so when you talk about the things of yesteryear and all of the traditional ways of being active, maybe, they didn't have as much technology as we have today. But then also the key difference between online activism and slacktivism is that the online activist is going to be soliciting for groups or organizations, whereas the slacktivist is really just like, all right, I like that. cool. An online activist will go ahead and say, hey, I'm retweeting this from someone else. Make sure that you sign up, that type of thing. It's really a slight difference. I'm going to come here.
Okay, ours was passive activism. Think locally, act locally. And the examples they gave on this sheet are making a donation, signing a petition, posting a sign in one's yard, displaying a bumper sticker, subscribing to a newsletter. And we had a lot of discussion about when does it turn from passive to active, and the Ice Bucket Challenge came up as well because we were wondering whether is that really a passive thing because people are actually making something new and then sharing it in a kind of a viral way, or running in a AIDS walk or something, is that passive or is that active because you have people who are doing they're actually going out there and doing something, but it's kind of an easy thing to do and are jumping on the bandwagon for something else. So some examples of passive, would be like wearing a pin for something that you support, or donating to your friend's walk for a medical cause or issue, that kind of thing.
All right, thank you. And so sometimes you feel like you time these things correctly, but I didn't time it. But we shared slacktivism and passive activism, and those often require low levels of participation. So thank you for bringing up where is that mark between being active or passive, because typically if you are contributing to passive activism, it's going to be at a lower level of participation with that. And so we have one more, the traditional activist.
Hello, we discussed the issues with, not issues, but traditional activism. And basically our definition is think globally and act locally. And this could be done by attending meetings or protests, soliciting donations, education via literature distribution, attending lectures or speeches, and volunteering. We really discussed what we have done, the actions that we have taken throughout our lives that would be considered as traditional activism. For instance, during the Ferguson cases in the movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, there were a lot of protests on school grounds. For instance, the African Student Organization and the Dream Defenders, and a lot of the organizations who are predominantly Black or African American did organize protests. Even I think the medical students of FIU did a die-in. So that's an example of protesting that I partook in, and soliciting donations in education. One thing that traditional activism, an aspect that has been influencing traditional activism is technology, really. Although we can update our status with an issue, but the fact that we are distributing literature and doing other stuff, and like even when we're at a protest, we'll be taking videos of the protest. That's another form of traditional activism that has been new throughout our lifetime. That's all.
That was great. So there is going to be a good example would be Selma, Alabama, and there's going to be a jubilee about the 50th anniversary of is it Bloody Sunday? Yeah. And so that's what we usually think of when we think of the activist, is that person that is, out there getting arrested, and really thinking and really living the cause, or in a very super activist way is what I like to think of it. But this is just one way of thinking about activism in a continuum. It's not the best way. It's just one way that we'd like to offer, because it does have different nuances when it comes to the online activism, and we're talking about Clicktivism today. So
you guys all came up with really great examples. That's going to lead us into kind of our next question. So basically we're asking, in your opinion, does online activism, is it as effective? So I know some people were saying that I'd send a petition, but I don't really know if it did anything. That's kind of like that thought. So anyone's thoughts on, is it effective? Or what's your opinion of it in general? Yeah.
I think I mean, I am kind of like think of it in both ways. I think it is effective, and one of the examples I can think of right now is like we had a class and where we were told about this. We all have heard about this Arab Spring in Egypt. So the way it all began is probably from a guy who was not even in Egypt at that time. He was a young software engineer or whatever, located in Dubai at that time, and he started all this conversation, and very soon it gained momentum. But at the same time, there had to be some people on the spot to take it to the next level. So I guess they are kind of complementary to each other, in my opinion.
Sometimes we are bombarded with definitions, and in making definitions, we isolate the essence of the goal, whether the goal rather. When you take activism and collectivism, what we need to emphasize is what's the level of activity, because a person can be a collectivistic, but yet his level of involvement will rise more will be more effective than a person that is an activist just because he participated on a meeting. Or right now, let's take for example, we are here in this meeting. Are we activists at this moment? Or let's take a person that is right now online, just like my partner over here said, participating on getting the word out. Is he more active than us in this room right now?
I think it's just a very good supplementary action, especially if it's like a grassroots organization and you're trying to raise money, things like that. I mean, if you can reach hundreds of thousands of people within seconds and collect that much money, I mean, that can be very productive. Also with things like petitions, you need petitions in order to get laws enacted and to have politicians move on things. Yeah, I mean, when there's people outside screaming and screaming, it does say one thing, but with a paper with all these names on it, that's ultimately what the politicians actually see and move on. So, it's a good supplementary action, but I think everything together, you have to have everything. Otherwise, it's not a full movement.
I think it's pretty. I think it's effective. I think that you're only going to get a certain amount of people that really do it. Like, let's say that number is 1%. 1% of everybody who hears about a cause is going to become an actual activist. But when you think of 1% of 1,000 people or 1% of 20,000 people, it increases the number. So maybe it doesn't increase the amount of people as far as percentage. Like I said, I think that it's always going to be the same percentage-wise. But I think that with the amount of people that hear about it and the amount of awareness that's created through it, that alone makes it more effective because you're going to have more people who are going to do something about it.
I kind of agree with all that was said, and I agree with the comment that was made that even for online activity, it can be more passive or more active depending on what I'm doing. And just a quick example. So I was having this conversation with a friend the other day over social media about, like, he was of the opinion that there is no gender disparity as far as race is concerned, and I could have ignored that. And in the past, I used to do that with a friend, let me not get into argument with or like a discussion with him. But nowadays, increasingly, I am choosing to try to have a discussion and explore the issue more. And my opinion is, if at least some people read that, maybe there is a doubt in their mind, and they can then go and look at it further. So I think even online, just sharing and exploring it in greater detail can be a little bit difficult.
Yeah. So, when I was growing up, you would get phone calls on your house phone for people asking, like, for money, or can you support this, or do you mind signing this, whatever. You didn't have the internet. And it was really easy to just stay in your bubble. No, I'm not interested, thanks, click, done. And you were able to stay in your community, and whatever affected your community or your own little bubble, you could work on. Now, and I mean, not to go back to the Ice Bucket Challenge, but I bet the majority of people here have seen at least some semblance of what ALS does to you. You've seen someone who cannot move their arms, cannot talk. You'd have never seen that 15 years ago. And so I feel like it will bring, sometimes online activism yeah, the people can be really passive. They can be, just a click of a like. But there are some people who, before this came about, wanted to help, but really just were in their little bubble. Whereas now there's this bigger awareness of what is going on, and it helps lead people to make changes. And sometimes those changes are really great, and sometimes it's a like on Facebook that is small but might be great for them. And so I feel like it opens the doors for people to be more active.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think one way in which it's effective, regardless of if it changes people's minds, and it might or might not, is giving support to the people who do support the causes already. So to use the wage equality thing, if you are watching the Oscars and Patricia Arquette says wage equality for women, and you're an activist for that, and your news feed blows up and you see 10 people talking about that she said that, it's so great that she said that, and being supportive of it, and you feel like, well, maybe it's not such a lost cause, maybe I'm not alone, maybe it's worth continuing to support this and not feel overwhelmed like there's no one else out there that also wants to do it.
That's a really good point. But I want to go back to what you said, which is I've had so many conversations on Facebook with people trying to create some common ground and help them understand why I feel about a certain issue that I do. And I find myself often very frustrated with Facebook as a forum to have those conversations. So I feel like because so much is lost in text, and because there are so many issues that people feel very passionately about, that when you're trying to discuss gender issues with somebody who is, for example, this is a real story, a man who doesn't have a great life and thinks that women have it way better than men, and you try to get to a point where you don't believe that that's true and get to common ground, people can shut down, it can become personal very, very quickly. And so I think it can be very challenging doing stuff like this online because you don't, in some ways it's easier when you talk about issues like that face to face because you're able to think about somebody else as a real person. And no matter as careful as you try to be about the way you word things to acknowledge someone else's perspective, sometimes people take things the wrong way and get very, very offended. So I don't know. Whether these conversations are effective or not, I think it's important to have them, but I think it's also very difficult to have them in an online space compared to in a personal space.
So I think at least the way that I was kind of raised, my parents gave kind of a negative outlook to activists, like the people out there sweeping, holding signs. They were always like, they're never doing it, something like that. And, for a long time, that's kind of how I thought, these people are crazy and they're overexerting themselves on the kind of thing. But then, by studying things online, it gets rid of that initial feeling of being very, very loud, and instead it gives you time to actually explain what's going on and why this is happening and why we're doing all of this. So that way you can read something online and say, oh hey, this actually isn't so bad. These people are actually trying to support something and these are reasons why, and they're not just screaming and throwing signs all over the place.
If I take it back to what Eric and my honorable CEO was saying, whatever action brings about any reaction. So when you try to bring awareness, whether it be you will have two different means, you will get a positive and a negative response. Either or. We bring about some changes in the person. How do I change the person's mind? Well, I can change that person's mind positively by supporting the cause that we are promoting, or negatively by rejecting what I'm saying. But in either case, I just brought about some type of change, some type of awareness in that person. In the case of gender equality, and then sometimes we face, when we think about activism, just like the beginnings, if I mentioned Selma, you mentioned the civil rights movement. yes, that's the type of activism, but the gay community in activity and bringing about changes to how we think now versus how people used to think before. The acceptance of the equality on the playing field. All those things brought about changes in the mind. You want to bring positive changes. You portray the positive side of your activities. Or negative changes. It will be seen by the person depending on how they were raised.
So, I mean, we want to highlight that we don't have the answers. I don't want to quote Kanye West, but I mean, he's the most notable saying that. It's really, we took Roundtable to like the meaning of Roundtable, and thank you for being participatory. And I know a lot of you are looking at us while you're talking. You can look at each other because really that's what it's about, is you all talking to each other and engaging with each other about this topic. Because I think we want to come about it in the most neutral way as possible. And so I'm nodding at everybody's statements, and so I think that's the, maybe national agreement kind of thing with being my American privilege. It's just a nod at everything, so people think that, so I don't want anybody to be like, oh, I want you to feel good, but also I just want you to feel like we're being as neutral as possible about this topic, and I don't want you to think that we have one way or the other that we're trying to persuade you with.
So you guys touched on a lot of things that the next video kind of said, and it's much better to hear it from you guys than from the video. So we're gonna go ahead and go past the video, but really great discussion. And we're gonna have another question for you. So, what are current examples of traditional activist movements, and what are past movements that have been impactful?
I think for me, the first movement that was ever viral or just seemed really impactful to me, it was really big, I think was the Truth campaign for cigarettes. Because I remember I'm a 90s kid. I grew up in the 90s, and so I saw all of it. And to me, that was like the first example of like, I guess, small Joe banding together and then, creating just this huge campaign that really, really took off. And I mean, I don't think that they ever thought that it was going to be as impactful as it was. But for me, that was like the first thing that ever really, really honestly stood out was that Truth campaign. And even till now, it's something that comes up in like classes that I've taken where we have to make a campaign. That's one that's always talked about, and it's always touched on and always, I guess, examined. Because it really was, I mean, extremely impactful, especially for, like I said, came out of nowhere. And this was before or I guess it was perfect timing with the coming of the internet and the blowing up of like AOL and I guess the first forms of like social media when you would get like the AOL CDs in the mail and you could try them for free. And it was like that exact same time. And so it was just like everything I feel like came together and really blew up. And to me, I think, and still, to me, honestly, that's still probably one of the most, if not the most, impactful campaign that I've seen in my lifetime.
Well, like not in my lifetime, but I know that before any internet or anything like that, like you have the women's movement trying to get to be able to vote, the black activists trying to be able to have equality and stuff like that. So it's not like, yeah, the smoking campaign also, it's more recent, and that was, you had the television, so it'd be broadcasted more, so it was able to get out there a little bit faster than just you're a woman and you're there and you're going together with all other women in your community trying to like hold up a fence, like go pick a fence and be like, no, women have rights to vote also and stuff like that. So, yeah.
As answering to your multiple questions in the screen, those answer the question of what are past movement. I think current examples of traditional activism are the marriage equality, the fact that to promote that no matter what gender you are, you have the right to be married. So that's a current example of traditional activism. In the past, you have the Pink Ribbon campaign, which is bringing awareness to cancer, etc.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can still call it current, if it is still continuing, but I can think of the Occupy Wall Street movement. And for past movements, I can think of the early days of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and the movement for like moving away from blaming gays and the gay community to raising more awareness, and there was a huge activism around that. So those are
Yeah, sorry, I was not trying to cut you off. One past movement as well that I can think of is the movement to prohibition. If you look at from a historical context, that was a huge activist movement, mostly by women at the time, that actually caused the legislation against alcohol to occur.
Those are really great examples. So we're going to look on the other side of that, which are examples of activist/activist movements and where that gained momentum quickly.
So you should have got the Spring, which is an example that was given in the article that we utilized to make this presentation. And there's a lot of talk about ALS that went out. Are there any other examples that you can think of? And then there was an advantage of getting a lot of people very quickly. And so if anyone has an example, that'd be great.
I'm actually going to try to make an interesting point and use the same example that someone used for the last slide, which is the marriage equality movement. Because while there are people protesting and there are people getting married and doing things in person, and how many people's main contributions, myself included, for main contribution is changing your profile picture to the red equal sign when there's a court case going on or something like that. So it's interesting to see how things that start now end up both.
Something that's current is the whole trying to legalize marijuana. So when it was trying to go on a couple months ago, everyone's like, yeah, it's totally gonna pass, but everyone that's saying it's gonna pass, nobody went to vote. So that's why it didn't pass. That's kind of like this activist. So like you're definitely supporting it, but you're not doing anything to get anything done.
Also, with every single time some psychopath goes and kills a lot of people, everybody goes to the internet and starts saying how guns should be legalized or illegalized, illegalized, banned, and that almost like always just kind of stops short. Like nothing ever happens. It's active for a little bit and then dies off.
Sort of like with the countries, communism, or like sort of like in Arab countries where there's SOS Venezuela, there's like in Egypt where they threw down the president, but now like we have another group that comes in that's probably not as strong. I mean, these are activists. This stuff is, you see this on Facebook a lot. It's like, oh, we need to topple this person, but the next person that's coming in isn't so great, but you don't know that because it's getting pushed.
Not only because it has raised awareness through the net, but also because it tries to protect the net, so that way
I think that one great example of Clicktivism and selectivity, it was the Bring Back My Girls campaign. It was a lot of it, but what was the result of that?
I think Eric makes a really good point about how a lot of movements today are taking part in multiple spheres, and they're occurring kind of online in slacktivist ways. For example, with the marriage equality, I think that the Black Lives Matter movement also is another one, where you have a lot of people changing their profile icons to say Black Lives Matter. And on the contrary, you have a lot of other people who are actually going out to protest and trying to support the issue that way. And so I think perhaps there's a complementary relationship between the two that I think is very interesting, because we're in a time of technology where you would never see that type of relationship in the past.
That brings us really great into our next slide. So you guys are all really touching on that, maybe it's a combination of both, or maybe it's not one or the other. She had mentioned that, you're not born into it. You're not kind of born with a picket sign, right? So you learn, you're going to have to evolve and take baby steps. Maybe today I'm going to make a Facebook, then tomorrow I'm going to get that sign. So we're going to kind of walk you through, this is a graphic for a story of an activist, right? So you're going to kind of start, once upon a time, there was activists, right? They're just sitting at home, have TV. If you're yelling at the TV, how far is that getting you? But no one's hearing that. Like maybe your neighbor, like if you're yelling really loud, but that's it, right? So that's kind of like, if you're there, if you're stuck there, not going anywhere, right? So maybe this person's realizing, hey, I can do a little bit more than sitting at home with the TV. So they go, taking it a little bit further, taking it worldwide, and then going to the media. So social media, Facebook is a little further than you yelling at the TV. You're getting more people than you and whoever happens to be over watching TV, right? So getting a little better. Social media happened, you're getting camera phones, you're getting Twitter, you have YouTube, so you're getting that momentum, you're slowly getting better, right? Then you're kind of switching over to the activist side, and you can start doing all sorts of different techniques using things like, haven't heard of like GoFundMe, right? You have a lot of things that we'll talk about later, but like different movements like Relay for Life and things like that, where you can donate as well as participate, right? So you kind of have those examples going there too. So then you're also talking about delivering faster justice. You can go and you can volunteer and then let people know that you're volunteering, invite them to come with you, ask them to go. So it's, even though you're posting in a Slacktivist way, you're asking for activism. And if you really follow up on it, not just click it and then 5 seconds later you're posting a cat meme. It's kind of, do you really care about this or do you care about the cat meme? So, and the cat meme's great, but you also have to remember kind of with the equality, so there's a lot of people who changed their sign to the red equal sign, but I also saw a lot of people change their sign to the red equal sign with 2 pieces of bacon. Right? It's funny, yeah, but at the same time, like, that is kind of almost, is it doing good or bad? So just as much, it's kind of saying that there's a handful of people who are really taking it to heart, and then there's also, for every activism thing that you can think of, I bet you there's a meme out there somewhere, right? Yeah.
I was thinking about something along those lines when she was talking about the online discussion, that I do think that, at least as of right now, Clicktivism or Slacktivism really can only go so far because of that. Because one of my favorite things to do anytime I'm on any site is to scroll down to the comments and watch what people say. And people never get along. There's always fights. There's always people going at each other. About any page, if you have comments, there's people fighting. And I think that what happens is that in person, and I think that in person, there's a lot of people who have those views. They're not going to jump into a conversation and say, hey, you're an asshole or whatever. But online, it gives everybody that anonymity to be able to throw in their 2 cents regardless of how stupid it may be. And then it even allows them to even make it worse than probably than they would usually say, just for, trolling, as they call it. And I do think that's a major thing. A lot of people just, that's what they do. There's like sites dedicated to just trolling and pissing people off. And so I don't think we're there yet, at least as far as Clicktivism or Slacktivism. I don't think it's there in a form for it to be a form of discussion. At least not yet. I think that there's, we need do a lot more evolving as a species before we can get online and get along with each other. But I think it is true what you're saying. I think that it only goes so far up until you hit that wall of just non-conforming.
So, I agree with that, and I also do think that that sometimes online activism is effective. One of the great examples you have already there, and I love it because it is also from India. Delivered faster justice, an example, Bal Thackeray dies and all that stuff. So that it is effective is proven when you get a reaction, as someone said. And that the authorities are getting scared by even online activism enough to arrest people shows that it is serving some purpose. So not necessarily online activism is also safe always.
Very good point. So you're seeing how this is a very fluid movement, right? So kind of what you're saying that you just because you might think right now, the only power I have, the only resource I kind of have is that computer. Well, you can use that and to take it further. And you can, just because you're a Slacktivist today or we were in the past doesn't mean you can't become an activist. And same with people who are activists about one topic, they might go all out, everything about that, but for other things, they might just post a like or post this other thing. So just really to kind of get you guys thinking and talking about this is one kind of story, and now we're going to ask you.
So if you would pair with the person next to you and just talk to them about your story. Were you a collectivist that is now a digital activist? Are you working towards trying to build more awareness to help other people? This gives an opportunity for everyone to speak without having to, speak out loud. I understand some people have trepidation. So engage now with another individual or another couple of individuals. That seems to work sometimes as well. Definitely an
Anyone wants to share some of the stories that they shared with their partners? Not loud, like what their story is of their personal activist or slacktivist story? Not all at once.
We've come to the conclusion that to protest is futile.
Okay, do you want to expand on that?
I thought that was
You want to expand on how you got there?
So many, you go through so many of these campaigns, and nothing ever changes. Time and again. Like I thought people weren't even wearing for the last 30 years. I've been blinkered and moronic. Okay, it's just been going on all this time. And Eric is upset about down pillows, which I never even thought about, but he has a point. That's what it does.
Alright, thanks for sharing. Ava?
I kind of agree with what you said, that people come up to the road and get together for rallies and everything, but nothing happens. I'm from Pakistan and I do see that kind of thing happening in my country every day, and it kind of made me feel that they don't have any work to do. They're just on the roads all the time, each and every day, blocking out the roads and making other people suffer. So and it has been so many years. The independence year of Pakistan was like 1947, and now it is 2015. These things I don't think makes a difference, but I have seen in history that people have made a difference, like what she was discussing about the program. I'm not very familiar about it. The one that you
Ferguson.
Yeah. Yes. So that made a difference in the history as well. So, and one more thing that we were discussing amongst ourselves was that it actually depends on your priority. When I was a teenager, my priorities were different, getting married and having children and everything, and then I'm done with those things, and now my priorities are different. I want to work for a society. So, the thinking changes. So, coming on the roads, I don't think it's a very good idea. But at the same time, I've also seen many other things.
Right off the bat, my opinion on things is really skewed, because if something doesn't personally affect me, I really don't care for it, and it's my complete honesty. So if something's happening in another part of the world, to me, what happens is I see it as nothing's happening. There's no change. It's just going to be a quick couple months, and it's just going to pass. And I think that's because of what technology's gotten us to. We're so used to multitasking and everything, and our life phases through very quickly. Ferguson happened, Ferguson passed. Trayvon Martin happened, it passed. We had issues with, so many different things. Going into Iraq, it was a big thing, and then it passed. To me, it's just, everything is a phase, and we all go through phases, and that's what movements to me are. It's just a phase for a moment. Coney, which was a phase, but that's my personal opinion on that.
I think the thing that's happening now with the social media is that if you have a feeling, you just let it out. And because of that, the emotions don't build up. And I don't know if anybody's tried cooking, but if you don't put any heat to it, it's not going to cook. So it's kind of it's just simmering away. There's no movement. There's no catharsis because you're just releasing emotion as is. And it goes nowhere.
Kind of piggybacking off of what both of them said. It doesn't have any effect, or it doesn't have any change. Most of the time we hear about it because of the media. And in one of my classes we were talking about how something can be really big on the media on every news channel, and then something else happens. What happens, whether it's here in the U.S. or in another part of the world, and it dies down because something bigger, attracts their attention. And it's kind of like a cycle. Unless you are personally affected by it, or if you have a great interest in it and you're really like doing things in person, it's kind of like it really does simmer and it goes down, which is a bad thing because back then when there were movements and activists really protesting, things were changing because the first protest, it didn't stop there. They kept at it. So we don't really do that. It's just, yeah, like it, share it, tell somebody, but then move on.
I do agree. I think that there is an oversaturation now. I think the problem is that before you would only hear of a movement if it was, I guess, successful and if it was really big. But nowadays you can hear about a movement even when it's just starting. So it makes it seem like there's, a million movements now and there wasn't before. There was, like, there's always been a bunch of movements, and there's always been a bunch of movements that didn't work. You didn't hear about them as often because there wasn't something like the internet. But I do think that it does work. I mean, after everything that has gone on with Ferguson and with some of the stuff here, they are implementing body cameras on policemen now. It is something that they're implementing in different cities, and they're going to be doing it here in Miami as well. So I don't think it's these things. We say, oh, whatever, they don't work. They crowd up the streets and they do nothing for us. But I mean, there is signs of it. Sometimes it does take long. Sometimes you have to keep at it. But it does make a difference. Like I said, I mean, look, just here alone, they are implementing body cameras, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that gets rolled out throughout the country. And it's all because of that, because of people banding together and protesting and signing petitions and doing everything that everybody says that doesn't work. It eventually does work. It's the reason why, women can vote, why I can vote, why African Americans can vote. It does work. It takes a while. Everything usually takes a while, but it does eventually work. You have to go through the process.
Sorry, thank you all for sharing. We have to go though. I always have to close my office to service and leadership. So if you want to get involved on campus, there's ways to do that. One way to sign up there is you can apply for a grant if you would like to serve the community. The deadline is up for the spring, but you can always apply for the summer. So if you have a service project in mind already and you have a good friend, come speak with us. And if you have any questions, we'll be around for a little while, but you can ask them to us. Remember, we don't have all the answers. Thank you again.